They thought blocking my only road would make me fall in line, pay their fees, follow their rules, maybe even thank them for it. What they didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that they were about to turn their quiet little neighborhood into the busiest cut-through in the entire county, and they'd have no one to blame but themselves. See, I wasn't looking for trouble when I bought that place. I was just looking for something simple, something quiet, a small house where I could breathe a little. It sat right on the edge of a newer development called Ridgeview Estates, one of those manicured, picture-perfect neighborhoods with trimmed hedges, matching mailboxes, and an HOA that took itself way too seriously. My place, though, it had been there long before Ridgeview ever existed. Built sometime in the late 70s, according to the records. No gates, no rules, no committee telling you what color your front door should be. Just a narrow strip of land, a gravel driveway, and a legal easement that ran straight through Ridgeview's main street, connecting me to the county road on the other side. It was all documented, clean and simple. I remember double-checking it during closing, sitting across from my realtor, asking, "So there's no issue with access, right?" And she just smiled, tapped the paperwork, and said, "It's locked in. They can't touch it." And for a while, she was right. Those first 2 years, they were easy. I'd drive out in the mornings, pass a few joggers, maybe wave at an older guy named Carl who watered his lawn like it was a full-time job. Nobody bothered me, and I didn't bother them. I kept my place modest, didn't throw loud parties, didn't give anyone a reason to complain. If anything, I felt like a ghost passing through their neighborhood, visible, but not really part of it. Then things changed. Ridgeview got a new HOA president, a guy named Daniel Harper. Mid-50s, always in pressed polos, the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. You know the type, polite on the surface, but there's something underneath, something calculating. I didn't think much of him at first. I saw him once or twice during his evening walks, clipboard in hand, like he was silently grading everyone's lawns. Then one afternoon, I found a letter in my mailbox. Official-looking, stamped with the Ridgeview HOA logo. I almost laughed before opening it, because I figured it had to be a mistake. It wasn't. The letter was short, almost casual in tone, like it was no big deal. It said that since I regularly used the Ridgeview access road, I was now required to contribute to monthly HOA maintenance fees, $300 a month, starting immediately. I remember reading that twice, then just standing there in my driveway, thinking, are they serious? Because legally, they didn't have a leg to stand on. That road wasn't theirs to charge me for, not in the way they were implying. My easement was recorded as a permanent right of access. It didn't come with conditions. It didn't come with fees. So I ignored it. I figured it was some kind of overreach, maybe a bluff. A week later, another letter showed up. This one wasn't as friendly. The wording had changed, less request, more notice. It said failure to comply could result in a review of access privileges. I actually laughed that time out loud. Review. I said to myself, you don't get to review something you don't own. Still, I didn't respond. Looking back, maybe that's what irritated them the most. Not the fact that I refused, but that I didn't even acknowledge them. Silence can feel like disrespect to people who are used to being obeyed. And Daniel Harper, he was definitely used to being obeyed. The real trouble started about 2 weeks later. It was a Monday morning, nothing unusual. I grabbed my keys, coffee in hand, half asleep, already thinking about the day ahead. I got in my truck, backed out of my driveway, and headed toward the main road like I always did, except this time, I didn't make it very far. About halfway down the street, I saw it. At first, my brain didn't even process what I was looking at. It was like something didn't belong in the picture. Then it hit me, a brand new metal fence stretching across the road. Not a temporary barrier, not some cones or a caution sign, a full-on steel fence, bolted into place, cutting off the road completely. I slowed down, then stopped, just staring at it. My first thought was, this has to be a mistake. Maybe construction, maybe some kind of emergency repair. But as I got out of the truck and walked closer, I saw the sign zip-tied to the fence. Private property. Unauthorized access prohibited. That's when my stomach dropped. Because suddenly, it wasn't a mistake anymore. It was intentional. They had actually done it. They had blocked the only road connecting my house to the outside world. I remember standing there in the quiet, hearing nothing but the faint hum of sprinklers in the distance, and thinking, they really think this is going to work. I pulled out my phone and called the number listed on the HOA letter. It rang twice before someone picked up. Ridgeview Estates HOA, this is Daniel. His voice was calm, almost pleasant. I took a breath, trying to keep my own voice steady. Yeah, Daniel, this is Lucas Bennett. I live on the property just outside your development. There's a fence blocking the access road. A brief pause on the other end, then, that's correct. No hesitation, no confusion, just confirmation. I tightened my grip on the phone. You realize that road is a legal easement, right? You can't just block it. He let out a soft chuckle, like I just said something mildly amusing. Mr. Bennett, he said, if you'd like to continue using our community's infrastructure, you need to contribute like everyone else. There it was. Not a misunderstanding, not a mistake, a calculated move. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. That's not how easements work, and you know it. Another pause, longer this time. Then he said, if you have concerns, I suggest you speak with our legal team. And just like that, he hung up. No argument, no negotiation, just a door slammed shut. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the fence, feeling this slow burn building in my chest. Not panic, not yet. Something else. Something quieter, colder. Because in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't about money. $300 a month? That wasn't going to make or break an HOA like Ridgeview. No, this was about control. About drawing a line and making sure everyone on the other side of it knew exactly where they stood. And me? I wasn't supposed to be there at all. I was the outsider who slipped through the cracks, the one they couldn't regulate, couldn't fine, couldn't vote against. And Daniel Harper, he didn't like that. So he decided to fix the problem the only way he knew how, by forcing me into a corner. What he didn't realize was that I don't do well in corners. And if he thought blocking that road was going to make me give in, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. I didn't try to climb the fence, didn't try to squeeze around it, or start tearing it down like some kind of movie scene. I just stood there for another minute, hands on my hips, staring at that clean, freshly installed steel like it was daring me to make the first move. And the more I looked at it, the clearer it became. This wasn't something they threw up overnight out of panic. This was planned, measured, approved in some neat little HOA meeting where people nodded along and convinced themselves they were in the right. And that realization did something to me. It cooled me off. Because anger makes you rush, and rushing is how you lose. So instead, I got back in my truck, drove it in reverse all the way back to my driveway, parked it, and went inside, made another cup of coffee, sat down at my kitchen table, and pulled out the folder I hadn't touched in 2 years, the one with all my property documents. If they wanted to play this game, fine, but I was going to play it right. About an hour later, I was sitting across from a lawyer named Ethan Caldwell, a guy recommended by a friend of mine who worked in real estate. Ethan wasn't flashy, didn't wear some expensive suit or try to impress you with big words. He just had this calm, steady way of looking at things, like he'd seen enough nonsense in his career that very little surprised him anymore. I laid everything out, the letters, the fence, the phone call, and then slid the easement paperwork across his desk. He read through it quietly, flipping pages, occasionally nodding to himself, and then, right in the middle of it, he smiled. Not a big grin, just this small, knowing smile that told me something had just shifted. I leaned forward a little. That good, huh? He looked up at me and said, Lucas, they didn't just make a mistake, they made a very expensive one. Now that got my attention. He tapped the document with his finger. This isn't just a private easement. This is recorded as a public access easement. See this language here. He turned the page toward me, pointing at a paragraph I'd skimmed a dozen times, but never really understood. This means the right-of-way isn't limited to you. It's legally recognized as a potential public connector, if it's ever developed that way. I blinked. Wait, so you're saying, he nodded. I'm saying that technically, this road they just blocked, it doesn't just belong to you. It can be used by the public, if the city decides to activate it. There was a moment there, a quiet one, where everything kind of rearranged itself in my head. Because up until that point, I'd been thinking small, get the fence removed, restore access, go back to normal. But what Ethan was suggesting, it wasn't about going back. It was about moving forward in a way they'd never see coming. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. So what do? He didn't hesitate. We call the city. Now, I'll admit, part of me thought that was a long shot. City offices aren't exactly known for jumping on things quickly, especially something like an old easement tucked away in property records. But Ethan seemed confident, and at that point, I trusted his read on the situation. So we reached out, filed the necessary request, submitted the documentation, and waited. And for about 2 weeks, nothing happened. No calls, no updates, no movement. Just silence. Meanwhile, I was still stuck. I couldn't drive out, so I started parking my truck along a dirt path behind my property and walking a half-mile through uneven ground just to get to it. Every morning, every evening, boots covered in dust, cutting through brush like I was living off-grid. And I could feel it, that quiet satisfaction from Ridgeview. Nobody said anything to my face, but you can tell when people think they've won. A couple of residents would slow down when they drove past the fence, glance over like they were watching a show, and I'm sure Daniel was somewhere in the background, convinced that eventually I'd crack, write the check, sign whatever they put in front of me, and fall in line. But then the city called. It was a Thursday afternoon. I remember because I was halfway through fixing a loose board on my porch when my phone rang. The guy on the other end introduced himself as Mark Delaney from the county planning department. Straight to the point, no small talk. Mr. Bennett, we reviewed your submission, and we'd like to come take a look at the property. I tried to keep my voice neutral, but I could feel something shifting again. Sure, when? Tomorrow morning. That alone was surprising. City moving fast? That's not something you see every day. So the next morning, 3 vehicles pulled up, 2 city trucks and 1 unmarked SUV. Out stepped Mark and a couple of engineers, clipboards in hand, already scanning the land like they were seeing more than just dirt and trees. I walked them through the property, showed them where the easement ran, explained the situation with the fence, and when we got to the blocked road, one of the engineers actually let out a low whistle. Well, that's bold, he muttered. Mark didn't say much at first. He just stood there, looking past the fence, then back at my land, then off toward the opposite side where another road ran about 100 yards out of view. I could almost see the lines connecting in his head. Finally, he turned to me and said, "You know, if this easement were extended through your back lot, it could connect Ridgeview Drive to County Route 14. I frowned slightly. Would that matter? He gave me a look, half surprised, half amused. Mr. Bennett, that would create a direct bypass for about 40% of local traffic. It would take pressure off the main intersection by the shopping center, cut commute times during peak hours." And just like that, it clicked. Not just for me, but for them. Because suddenly, this wasn't about one guy and a fence anymore. This was infrastructure. This was traffic flow. This was something the city could actually use. Within a week, they were back, this time with survey equipment. Stakes went into the ground, measurements were taken, maps were updated. And word started to spread. Ridgeview residents began to notice the activity. People who had ignored me for years were suddenly very interested in what was happening on my property. I'd see them standing at the edge of the fence, whispering, pointing, trying to piece it together. And then, one afternoon, I saw Daniel Harper walking toward me. No clipboard this time, no polite smile. Just a tight expression and a very different kind of energy. He stopped a few feet away, glanced at the survey markers, then back at me. What exactly is going on here? His tone was controlled, but there was something underneath it now. Not confidence, something closer to concern. I wiped my hands on my jeans, took my time answering. City's looking into the easement. He narrowed his eyes slightly. For what purpose? I shrugged, casual. You might want to ask them. That didn't sit well with him. I could see it. The lack of control, the fact that something was happening outside his authority, it was getting to him. If this is some kind of attempt to retaliate, he started. I cut him off, calm but firm. Daniel, you put up the fence. That landed. He didn't respond right away. Just held my gaze, jaw tightening ever so slightly. For the first time since this whole thing started, he didn't have the upper hand. And we both knew it. The next few weeks moved fast. Faster than I expected. Permits were approved, plans were finalized, and then one morning, the construction crews showed up. Not 1 or 2 trucks, a full operation. Excavators, paving equipment, crews in high-vis vests moving with purpose. They started clearing a path along the edge of my property, cutting through brush, leveling ground, and with every pass, the shape of something bigger began to take form. A road. Not just any road, a connector. The first day it officially opened, it didn't feel real. I remember standing near the edge of my property, arms crossed, just watching as the first few cars rolled through, slow at first, cautious, like people testing something new, then a little faster, then more of them. And within a couple of hours, it was steady. Not chaotic, not overwhelming, just constant. A quiet stream that didn't stop. By the end of that week, it wasn't a new road anymore, it was a route. People had figured it out. GPS apps had picked it up. Morning commuters started cutting through to avoid the main intersection. Delivery vans followed, ride shares, construction trucks, even school traffic. And Ridgeview, that perfectly controlled, carefully curated neighborhood, it changed overnight. You could feel it. The stillness was gone. No more empty streets in the afternoon. No more uninterrupted jogs down the middle of the road. Now there were engines, tires, movement, life, in a way they never planned for. I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice the irony, or that I didn't feel a certain kind of satisfaction watching it all unfold. Not because I wanted to ruin anything, but because they chose this. They pushed for it. All they had to do was leave things alone. About 2 weeks after the road opened, there was a knock on my door. I already knew who it was before I even got up. When I opened it, Daniel Harper was standing there. Same press shirt, same posture, but everything else was different. The confidence? Gone. In its place was something tighter, controlled, but strained. He glanced past me for a second, probably noticing the faint hum of traffic in the background, then looked back at me. "Lucas," he said, voice measured. "Do you have a moment?" I leaned against the doorframe, casual. "Depends." He exhaled slowly, like he was choosing his words carefully. "We need to talk about what's happening." I nodded slightly. "Yeah, I figured you might." There was a pause, not awkward, just heavy. Then he stepped a little closer, lowering his voice. "This situation, it's getting out of hand. The traffic, the noise, it's affecting property values. Residents are upset." I tilted my head, watching him. "That's so." He nodded, quick. "We're hoping to come to some kind of arrangement. Maybe work with the city, limit access, add restrictions, something to restore the character of the neighborhood." And there it was. Not a demand, not an order, a request. I couldn't help it. I let out a small breath through my nose, almost a laugh. Not loud, not mocking, just honest. "Daniel," I said, "I think you already know what I'm gonna say." His jaw tightened again, just for a second. "Humor me." I met his eyes, steady. "Talk to the city." That landed exactly the way it had weeks earlier, just on the other side now. He didn't respond right away. Just stood there, absorbing it, realizing that whatever control he thought he had over this situation, it was gone. Completely. "You could have just paid the fees," he said finally, quieter this time. Not angry, almost reflective. I shrugged. "You could have just left the road alone." And that was it. No yelling, no dramatic exit. He gave a small nod, more to himself than to me, then turned and walked back down the path, past the line where my land met theirs, back into the neighborhood that no longer felt as private as it used to. Over the next month, Ridgeview tried to adapt. They removed the fence, of course, quietly, no announcement, like it had never been there in the first place. Then came the landscaping, rows of young trees planted along the roadside, decorative stones, even a couple of speed signs. Little things meant to soften the change, to make it feel intentional instead of forced. But none of it changed the reality. The road was public now, officially designated, mapped, maintained by the city. There was no going back. And people talked. Not just in Ridgeview, all over town. Some thought it was justice. Others thought it was overkill. I heard both sides. At a gas station one evening, a guy recognized me. Didn't even introduce himself, just said, "You're the road guy, right?" I laughed a little. "Guess so." He shook his head, grinning. "Man, HOA picked the wrong fight." But not everyone saw it that way. A woman at the hardware store told me, "You could have handled that differently. Their family's in there." And she wasn't wrong. That's the thing about situations like this. There's always more than one angle. Yeah, the HOA overstepped. Yeah, what they did was illegal. But the fallout? It didn't just hit the people making the decisions, it hit everyone. Kids, retirees, people who had nothing to do with that fence. And I thought about that more than once. Late at night, sitting on my porch, listening to the distant flow of cars where there used to be silence. Did I regret it? No, not really. Because I didn't create the situation. I responded to it. But I won't pretend it was clean, either. Actions ripple, even the justified ones. A few weeks later, I saw Daniel again. Not at my door this time, just walking along the sidewalk, slower than usual. When he noticed me, he gave a small nod. No tension, no challenge, just acknowledgement. And I returned it. Because at some point, the fight ends, even if the consequences don't. The road's still there now, busier than ever. If you drive through that part of town, you'll probably use it without even thinking, just another shortcut on the map. And you'd never know what it used to be, or how it got that way. But I know, and so does Ridgeview. All because someone thought control mattered more than understanding the rules they were trying to enforce. So here's the question, and I'm genuinely curious what you think. Was this justice, or was it too much? Should I have just paid the fee and kept the peace, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd expect. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, or a situation where someone tried to push you into a corner, I'd really like to hear how it turned out.